from him, a couple of notes from him. Now, you're right, Craig. You mentioned Quentin Johnston. It was obvious that without him, something changed. Duggan, I mean, he was like he does, scratching and clawing from Sonny Dykes. We felt like we would have him all week, but we got into the game and he just didn't feel right. So we didn't want to take a chance. We want him to get him back 100% healthy. So you wonder if, in fact, how healthy you would think he would have to. You'd have to like maybe rip his helmet off for him not to play in Austin on Saturday.
In Austin or in Waco 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I think right now they're worried about Austin.
Yeah, I mean that's
he hurt Baylor last year. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, especially just knowing Baylor's history with TCU, he could miss the game this week, and they'll be like, I don't know, and then come out and have 11 receptions in Waco in a couple weeks, but or in just over a couple weeks. But yeah, TCU. They did. They play fast and loose a little bit again, but then Texas Tech loses Baron Morton. We don't know how long he's going to be out, and without him, they're back to being this kind of unbalanced. It just doesn't look good, and Tyler Shuck. I mean, he just doesn't look like he's ready.
Donovan Smith would turn it over, and he did against Baylor, and I know he's had some issues with that, but they did seem to be offensively somewhat dangerous when he was running the show at quarterback, and they did as well with Baron Morton, but I don't know how long he's out. Also, another note on TCU, and Craig, go back to what we were talking about. D. Winters, heck of a player for TCU, the linebacker, targeting in the second half. Will miss the first half against Texas. Shodrick Banks, an A&M transfer, came in and played very well in his spot.
Yeah, I mean, the Texas Tech offense was fine with Baron Morton and, then when he went out with Tyler Shuck. But, they're just kind of what they are. I mean, this is about TCU. TCU's the team that's unbeaten. TCU's the team that's, right there on the verge of booking a Big 12 championship game. And your questions about Quentin Johnston and all that, yeah, without Quentin Johnston, they are not nearly as much of a threat offensively. Duggan didn't have, some big, huge day. He was pretty mild, quite frankly. Didn't even have, I don't even think, 200 yards passing. Not as much of a threat in the run game as he's been at times either. I mean, really for TCU, I think this came down to Kendry Miller having another big game and then just getting, squeezing enough out of those receivers and guys like, a Tay Barber, for example. But outside of that, I mean, yeah, they don't have Quentin Johnston. They look a lot more one or two dimensional than the 3D explosive offense that we saw, kind of zooming it, hitting the big plays. I mean, they're a big play offense still. That's what their guys are, big play guys, but he's the biggest big play guy of all of them. And so without him, that's a huge element of their game that kind of opens everything else up that's no longer there. And you can key in a bit more on the rest of the cast, including Max Duggan. So kudos to Kendry Miller for carrying the load, but yeah, they're going to have to get Quentin Johnston back this next week I already am kind of leaning towards Texas anyways in this game. I don't know just yet how I'm going to go, but if Quentin Johnston's not playing, then I'm certainly leaning towards Texas in this game because I think they're playing with confidence right now, and I think even if it gets into a shootout, give me who's got the best cast, and if Quentin Johnston's down for TCU, then I think that, potentially tips the scales in Texas's favor.
All right, Anthony Hill. Garrett, if you don't mind, he's a number 2 player ranked in the ESPN class of 2023, committed to A&M. This came down today with him decommitting. I just saw a note from one of the UT fans. Of course, it doesn't take long for someone to go, hey, come see us. And maybe it's the TCU-Texas game, which somebody mentioned on the chat room or in the chat room. Anthony Hill committed to A&M, a big boy star player. Remember now, Denton Ryan is where Sanders, the tight end, who is so good. He is an absolute beast for UT. That's where he went to play his high school football at Denton Ryan. So I'm not sure. It didn't affect Anthony Hill's original decision, but A&M's free fall, you might see this now become an issue. And, Paul, what did you tell me in the text message?
This is going to be what ultimately undoes Jimbo, if it does, and make his leash shorter, is that, right now he's got these great recruits and all that, but if they're going to make a big, bold move and pay a bunch of money to buy out, it's going to be because he can't get players anymore. Again, not happening anytime soon, but if this trend continues over a couple of seasons, they'll figure out a way to do that because then it's trending, what they're paying them all that money for, they're not getting anyway, so they're going to have to shift. They're 1-5. They're in the SEC right now. They're last in the SEC West. They're paying the third highest paid coach in the country to be last in the SEC West.
No, they're not. I mean,
Yeah,
they are
I mean, yeah, but
technically.
that's what they're doing right
no,
now,
they're not.
so, yeah.
Hey, Garrett, check your email, Craig.
This season's been an utter failure for A&M for whatever reason you want to point to. And the moment you start losing recruits, that's usually the death knell. That's what happened to Mac Brown. Was ultimately they just kind of were treading water a little bit, and recruiting wasn't quite as sexy as it had been in some time. And as a result, I think that was like kind of one of the final straws. Was, man, we're not even getting like number 1, number 2 recruiting classes at this stage. Like, this is enough's enough. But that's bad news for Jimbo. I already saw like the UT article from whoever it was, like pumping up the chances for Texas to land him. So A&M's loss could very well be their gains. I did find it funny though. I was listening to, I think it was maybe it was a press conference from today. Like Jeff Lebby, maybe I was trying to see what they had said like a couple days removed from having watched the Baylor film, and it was just so odd to me. And maybe this is just the industry and kind of where it is, and I don't know, but I understand that recruiting is the lifeblood. I understand that recruiting is like an entire industry. Like, our site covers recruiting. I know that basically anybody working in college football like has some recruiting thing that they talk about. I get its importance, absolutely. I understand why you've got to talk about it, but I swear that unless I just completely misheard it, like the first questions directed at Jeff Lebby in his press conference today were about recruiting, which I just find ridiculous. I don't know. Maybe I'm silly for that to be your overall concern coming out of that game and where you are in the season and all that, and you're worried about recruiting. And I can kind of understand it because I know it's the lifeblood, but
also when the answer to that question for Jeff Lebby can only legally be it's going well or it's not.
But it was like, what do you think the loss and how it affects recruiting? I'm like, how does it affect the team? Like the team that has another month to play, like the team that's trying to get bowl eligible, like save me I just feel like this always looking way ahead stuff is just gets a little out of hand. And because you do that, you never actually have to look at the present. You just always kick the can down the road to that next class or that next quarterback or that next guy. And I get it, but
one of the things that could be happening is Colton Bosick, the young man from Austin Westlake, who's committed to Oklahoma. All of a sudden, it looks as if he is leaning towards, again, Texas bringing in a haul, very similar to what A&M was doing. Now, again, this is just what is on, the various sites, but you start to see a feeding frenzy. And it's going to back and forth. If TCU wins, maybe then it kind of dies down a little bit. I don't know. But there's only about a month until National Signing Day.
Yeah. But to the person who asked that question, does the 3-point loss affect recruiting more than the 49.1 they had a couple weeks before?
I'm not trying to like single people out, but it's like that's your important question to start things off with is about the recruiting. And I get it. Like, and you bring a very good example of why. And we're about to get into that time period where it's really going to be a grind with recruiting and early signing day and all that. So I understand it to an extent, but I find that a lot with big programs. And I get that's why they're big programs is because of recruiting, but I think there's a lot more to talk about coming out of that game than, who the 4 and 5 stars are going to be. But then again, that's part of what Venables is building. So,
yep, absolutely. Let's get to a couple of more graphics.